And this may correlate with just an overall sense of well-being, being that, you know, their body is fat adapted or keto adapted, that their brain, their organ, their whole physiology is in tune and adapted to this nutritional ketosis. So, and that can be hard for some people, because it's literally forcing their body to use a fuel that it doesn't want to use, because it's mimicking the physiological phenomenon of starvation. And the body doesn't want to be in starvation for survival. So carbohydrate restriction mimics, you know, the physiological state of survival.
So the reason,
fasting,
I believe, most likely the reason this works is that it follows one of the principles that I believe is pervasive to good health, which is RAP. We replicate our ancestral practices. And our ancestors did not have access to food 24/7, so they regularly went through periods of decreased calories. So that's probably why this works. If our ancestors didn't, then we wouldn't need to do that. But we have to honor our biochemistry and to achieve those benefits. So the 4 to 6 week window is phenomenal. That's good to know. And then I would encourage people to stick with it, to get through that. Use a lot of coconut oil to give yourself energy until you've achieved. I mean, you could do it with the meters that you mentioned, but you also, this is such a huge point, the hunger disappears. When your hunger for carbs disappears, you know you are burning fat, because that's one of the side effects. And it's obvious, it's plain as day, it's not a mystery. It's like the turning lights on in a room. You'll know as soon as it hits, because it's so obvious. And it's so consistent. I mean, it happens to almost everyone.
I would agree. There are some people that fail to adapt to the ketogenic diet, but they're the exception rather than the rule. And most people who say, you know, I tried a ketogenic diet, I just couldn't do it. And I was like, well, tell me what you did. You know, it's like, well, I was eating, you know, like 200 grams of protein and like, you know, 30 grams of fat and 0 carbs. I was like, no, you're following a high protein diet, you know, and your blood glucose was all over the place. And you weren't making ketones because you're not giving your body the fats that are, you know, needed. You know, the ketones are a product of the liver. So basically, give your body fats, feed the liver fats from your adipose tissue or from, you know, fats from your diet, and it will make ketones. And I think it really comes down to having that sustained nutritional ketosis to fuel your brain and keep your brain happy, shall we say, during periods of reduced glucose availability. And it's those dips in blood glucose that's going to create that glucose withdrawal syndrome in the brain. It's a dysphoria, I guess you would say. You just don't feel good. And I see it all the time in people that I know that skip a meal. You know, they're like, I got to eat now. We got to stop someplace. I got to eat. You know, because I ate 3 hours ago and I ate carbohydrates and now I'm hungry again and I got to eat something. And when you're fat adapted, you forget what that feels like.
Right, it's just gone.
I remember feeling. I used to eat a lot of fish and rice and pasta, and I grew up in an Italian family where it was basically a pasta-based, you know, family with lots of bread. And I remember feeling hungry and like the feeling like I need to eat right now. I need to eat something, and I don't feel that way anymore. I actually have to remind myself to eat.
Yeah, it's metabolic freedom and flexibility once you achieve this. So it's really worth the effort. It's 4 to 6 weeks of somewhat discomfort, no question, or it's uncomfortable feeling, but definitely worth the effort. I want to comment on, you know, I would agree with you that 2 meals a day is probably optimal. What I find myself doing, though, because of just the hassle factor and inconvenience, I mean, I will eat 2 meals a day, but frequently when I'm at home, I'll eat 1 meal a day. But I substitute snacks around that. So, and the snacks are typically 2 macadamia nuts for 2 reasons. One is because they're the highest nuts and highest fat in any nut that I know of, and the lowest in protein. So it's closest to that metabolic window that you want. And then also a candy that I make from coconut. It's primarily coconut oil, some coconut flour, coconut flakes, and some natural sweeteners like stevia. So I supplement that, so I'm getting other calories and fats around that big meal a day, which typically varies from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So have you ever played with something like that, where you're having these smaller little snack meals around that?
I do that. My typical morning routine is to wake up and actually have an amino acid supplement, which, by the way, is leucine, a little bit of leucine, a little bit of amino acid mixture, and some spirulina. Actually, it tends to be just a buffer for the amino acids. And I'll have a little bit of an amino acid mixture when I wake up with some spirulina and a few things, plant-based proteins actually, just a small amount. And then I brew coffee. And I don't know if you're familiar with bulletproof coffee.
Oh yes, yes.
Yeah. So basically, I take almost a third of a stick of butter and kind of blend it up and whip it up with some strong coffee. And I'll sip on that and just kind of work, wake up early in the morning, 5, and I'll have the most productive, 2, 3, 4 hours of working just off fat, essentially, off the butter. And then I have to kind of force myself to eat breakfast, and this is kind of contrary to what I was just talking about, but I know if I don't eat breakfast and I get into a work pattern and I'm at work until like 8 o'clock at night, I probably will get hungry during the day. So I might have a couple, free range eggs and a little bit of sardines and broccoli. I know that doesn't sound like a very appetizing breakfast, right? Like sardines in the morning, but
it works.
But that's typically what I eat. Yeah, it's just it's really heavy on fat, and kind of moderate with the protein. Not I used to eat like a dozen egg whites and oatmeal. I remember that being one of a staple breakfast. But now I eat
a couple
whole eggs. Yeah, and I cook it in coconut oil, and usually have some kind of greens like broccoli, asparagus, or spinach omelet or something like that, some mushrooms, and that'll sustain me. The butter in the morning with my coffee and a high-fat, moderate protein, low-carb breakfast will sustain me for half of the day, 12 hours. And I might hit some, MCT oil in the middle of the day, coconut oil, or a little, I have an amino acid supplement that I take occasionally. And then I eat, dinner is my bigger meal of the day, and it typically follows some kind of physical activity, whether it be, walking the dog or going to the gym or, some kind of physical activity. So I have it immediately after. Okay. And it's typically, protein, a big salad, and lots of fat. So my fat intake is probably about 300 grams a day. Wow. Believe it or not.
So percentage-wise, how many calories would you say are from fat? Is it like percentage-wise, so like 70% of your calories are from fat?
Yeah, I would say about that. Yeah, on some days it might be as low as 50, and on other days it may be as high as 80 or 90. Okay. Yeah, but about 70. That's pretty accurate.
Yeah, so that's basically what I follow too, about 70% fat. Most people, most conventional nutritionists or dietitians would strongly disagree with that, of course.
Our research here has evolved, by basically I was studying the effect of neuroprotective agents against seizures, and I stumbled upon nutritional ketosis as an effective way to prevent seizures, and that led to a number of projects, probably 5 or 6 projects that are ongoing now that are giving compelling evidence to show that metabolic therapies in the form of calorie restriction, ketogenic diet, or ketone supplements. So what I didn't really mention, similar to MCT product, that we develop and test ketone esters, ketone salts. Oh. And so creating nutritional or even starvation ketosis without dietary restriction is of interest to the military, because they are aware that nutritional ketosis has a very powerful anti-seizure effect, which is important for Navy SEAL divers that use a closed-circuit rebreather. So if we can achieve that without calorie restriction or without carbohydrate restriction and elevate blood ketones to the level of fasting ketosis, we can, in essence, feed the brain an alternative fuel that can enhance brain metabolism and preserve brain function under periods of stress and under periods of oxidative stress, for example, high pressure oxygen breathing. So the ketone supplements, ketone esters and ketone salts that we developed have been shown to be very neuroprotective, and we've published a report on that. And in the American Journal of Physiology, actually, the title is Therapeutic Ketosis as a Seizure Prevention Against Oxygen Toxicity. And tomorrow, actually, there'll be a press report out, a press release on our paper that was recently accepted in PLOS One journal. It's an open access journal, so readers will be able to, to get this, and the title of it is The Ketogenic Diet and Hyperbaric Oxygen as a Therapy for Metastatic Cancer. So as you know, most people who die of cancer die of not the tumor per se, but the metastatic process. And there's really no treatment or cure for metastatic cancer. So that's one of the reasons we wanted to study it, because no one's really studying it because it's hard to show efficacy in any kind of animal model of metastatic cancer. And we've demonstrated that the ketogenic diet by itself can extend survival in animal models of metastatic cancer, but when it's combined with hyperbaric oxygen therapy 3 times per week, that there is an additive effect, and that you get a significant reduction in tumor growth, decrease in tumor size, and significant extension of life when therapeutic ketosis achieved with the ketogenic diet is combined with hyperbaric oxygen. So tumors thrive in a low oxygen environment. As a tumor grows, it exceeds its ability to supply oxygen to the center of the tumor, and that low level of oxygen, and we call hypoxia, actually further activates the oncogenes, the cancer-promoting genes, activates things like HIF-1 alpha, VEGF, IGF-1 signaling goes up, and hyperbaric oxygen can reverse tumor hypoxia intermittently, and in doing that, it can actually turn off the oncogenes, and there's published reports on this. More importantly is that, you know, the tumor thrives in a low oxygen environment, and it's adapted to that low oxygen environment. So when you saturate a tumor with oxygen, because the mitochondria are damaged, it overproduces oxygen-free radicals in the form of superoxide anion, and this oxygen-induced increase in free radicals can actually cause the tumor to kill itself. It overproduces free radicals, you know, in the presence of high levels of oxygen.
This is a good benefit of free radicals.
Can damage the tumor. And when that natural form of oxidative stress is given to the tumor during the ketogenic diet, so the ketogenic diet will put metabolic stress on the tumor cells by limiting glucose availability and elevating blood ketones, which your normal cells can use, but cancer cells can't use. So it compromises the metabolism of the tumor. And then you hit the tumor with a high pressure of oxygen by hyperbaric oxygen, which is breathing 100% oxygen at an elevated hyperbaric pressure. We're at 1 atmosphere now, and we use like 2.2 atmospheres or 2.5 atmospheres of oxygen, which will probably increase the tumor oxygen tenfold. So we're using a natural form instead of radiation, which works by killing cancer by causing free radical formation, by destroying the tissue and creating free radicals. Hyperbaric oxygen is just a more natural way to do it without damaging the natural cells. And it seems to be synergistic with the ketogenic diet. So there will be a report on this tomorrow, a press release, and the paper will be available tomorrow.
Well, please send us a link to that. We'll put it in the
Yes,
interview.
yes, I will. And we also, you know, I'm working with a foundation called Winning the Fight for neurodegenerative diseases. And this is a foundation primarily to treat patients with ALS. And I've been testing what has been termed the Diana protocol. So the Diana protocol is a metabolic therapy that elevates blood ketone levels and actually is a combination of nutritional supplements that includes alpha-ketoglutarate, which is a Krebs cycle intermediate and energy metabolite, a soluble form of CoQ10, a soluble ubiquinol, GABA, the amino acid GABA, and caprylic acid, which is an 8-carbon medium-chain triglyceride. So these things in combination have been shown anecdotally in patients to stall the progression of ALS. And this observation was first shown in Deanna Tadone. Her father is a retired orthopedic surgeon. His name is Dr. Vince Tadone. And they have a foundation. They contacted me, and I met Deanna, I met with a family, and I observed that they were getting a real therapeutic effect to this metabolic therapy, which involved elevating blood ketones and giving the body high energy intermediates in combination with cofactors like soluble CoQ10 to enhance metabolic efficiency. And the reason why this works is that all neurodegenerative diseases are associated with impaired energy metabolism, and that the impairment of the cell to make energy causes the membrane potential to collapse, and then it oversecretes glutamate, which is an excitatory amino acid transmitter. It can activate the NMDA receptors, AMPA receptors, which can be excitotoxic. So the hallmarks of ALS pathology is glutamate excitotoxicity, excess calcium, and oxidative stress. And these are, what I believe, downstream epiphenomenon, or downstream consequences of failed energy metabolism. So if we address the issue upstream by giving a metabolic therapy that fuels the cells, in this case the motor neurons for ALS, that helps the cells maintain ATP production within the cell, the cells will maintain their resting membrane potential, and it will prevent the collapse of the metabolism, which contributes to excess glutamate excitotoxicity. So many of the therapies now are just, blocking the glutamate receptors or blocking the accumulation of the protein, the toxic proteins that occur as a consequence of failed energy metabolism. The therapy that we're testing, and I think the therapies of the future, will be metabolic therapies that address the underlying metabolic dysfunction associated with the cell. And for some reason, in patients that have ALS, they are responsive to TCA cycle intermediates or Krebs cycle metabolites. When these are given at high doses, it seems to restore energy metabolism, perhaps in the motor neurons, which decreases the symptoms. So the question is, are we just decreasing the symptoms, or are we stalling the pathology? So Deanna's been taking this Deanna Tadone has been using this protocol for several years now, and it seems she has beaten the odds as far as, progression of ALS, which is a terrible disease.
Sure.
And a number of other patients. I think there's 1,000 patients that have registered with the foundation at Johns Hopkins, Duke University, Emory, and these are being evaluated. It's too early to tell, but our animal studies definitely showed an extension of survival with this metabolic therapy that elevates blood ketones.
Do you think this would be also helpful for other neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, or even autoimmune motor dysfunction diseases like multiple muscular dystrophy?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Alzheimer's disease. Actually, today in the paper, the Tampa Bay Times here, there's a story of Mary Newport, and I know Mary. She's
coconut
a good
oil,
friend of mine.
Yeah.
So as you can see, Mary's in the corner there with her husband, and another report showing that the Alzheimer's Institute here has actually started a clinical trial to determine. They have coconut oil and a placebo, which is olive oil or some kind of plant-based oil, and that they give to patients. I think there's 60 patients in the trial. And the question is, does giving coconut oil enhance brain metabolism to delay the Alzheimer's pathology? So they're going to look at, not only cognitive function, but actually, do an amyloid PET scan to see if it's impacting the progression of the pathological proteins.
But do you think the same supplements would be helpful? The same supplements used for the ALS would be helpful in those diseases, like Alzheimer's?
Yeah. That's a very good question, and I know the foundation is in discussion with the Alzheimer's Institute, because they have reports of Alzheimer's patients have contacted this foundation that primarily specializes in ALS therapy, but they are reports from Alzheimer's patients that are telling them that it's working for Alzheimer's disease, that the tremors are decreasing, that there's an improvement in cognitive function. So this might put pressure on, the Institute to run a study to test the Deanna protocol, which is being used in many ALS patients to perhaps use it in Alzheimer's patients, and Parkinson's disease patients too have reported. Excellent. I've had several contact me because they know we're doing the animal studies on the transgenic animals that are models for these diseases, and we saw a positive effect, and that'll be published soon. But